we're now to the last session of the day. So, Billy can come over here.
Thank you.
On the panel earlier, the
Thank
product
you.
manager with Tesla, and he's going to talk a little bit about success stories, lessons learned around implementing intelligent automation.
And do we have slides somewhere here?
Yeah, should just click next.
Yeah, I have a few more slides, so just click past them.
You can use that clicker.
We had a lot prepared just in case. So yeah, sorry guys. Well, this will be sent out. So.
Your slides are way better, so maybe I should use yours.
What kind of improv can you do?
All right. Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about success stories and lessons learned in implementing intelligent automation. And it's supposed to be a case study. It's not a single case study, so it's just probably going to be a compilation of different learnings. And I want to make it more conversational rather than the presentation. So if something resonates with you or if you strongly disagree, let's just talk about it when it's fresh. Just a little bit about myself, very little. I'm not going to promote anything here. But in terms of the problems I work on and how they relate to automation, I'm currently with Tesla for the last half a year, 3 years at Uber before, and lots of other kind of, again, VC-funded startups. So same mentality around fast growth, solving problems for customers which have not been solved before. And there is a number of stories which I'm going to be touching. So there are some stories on Uber side, automating activation of driver accounts that they touched in the panel, automating some of the vehicle registration documents upload. For Tesla, we're thinking of how we can automate test drives, for instance, in terms of like, do we have to be limited by number of humans and number of vehicles we sell for test drives? Right? Those are type of creative problems that I think on a day-to-day basis. And education-wise, it actually now comes pretty handy. So it's for automation, I feel like you have to wear kind of a couple different hats. One is physicist type of hat. Why? What's happening? Can I experiment? What's going on here? Right? Like it's kind of physicist approach. And economics-based approaches, you cannot really run any experiments, right? Like it's too expensive to run experiments on humans. So you're more like you come up with a framework. OK, value creation. Let's define what the value is, the top line, the expense, the bottom line. Let's drive it up. So I feel like both of those hats are quite useful. So, the format is a little bit broken, sorry. So I wanted to first start with, let's think about automation as plain humans without being a person who deals with it on a day-to-day basis. What does automation mean to me, and what kind of questions or concerns do I have with automation? So this first question, it's basically, if you search Dilbert for automation, you'll find, I think, 6 different cartoons. I just picked this one. It's like every one of us is potentially concerned about losing our job to a machine, right? Like, and maybe a question to you, who believes here that your job will eventually be automated? Is there anyone who doesn't believe your job can be automated? Oh, you don't believe so? OK. But that's one concern that people actually have, right? Is my job going to be automated? And then the second one, I think it's even funnier. So what happens when all of us get replaced? This actually is a pretty interesting problem to think about, because when everyone is jobless, it's a pretty interesting world if we accept that this world might exist, right? And I've heard discussions on this topic around, OK, so if this world happens, then probably it doesn't even matter because it's pretty bad outcome. So why don't we think about the world where this doesn't happen and where we all survive and prosper and technology is actually a friend to us? But those are two key questions which come to my mind as basically just a person who does not think of automation professionally, but thinks of it at how does it impact me and my friends, my family? Those are 2 key questions. And starting with like what lessons have we learned? Actually, let me scroll first to the lessons. I want to talk about several things. One is, it's really basic, but it didn't come to me quickly. Automation is actually not the goal. So if you're trying to automate something for the sake of automation, if you have automation roadmaps, it's probably a reason to think twice. Like there is a key customer need or customer company problem that must be there that you're solving, which automation contributes into. If you have an automation roadmap without the key customer needs behind it, there may be a problem. And I learned it again by real examples. So I was thinking of automation as a great thing before, simply because for company it's usually good, right? So it usually is helping to drive costs down, but in fact it quickly and frequently comes with a value to the customer which could be easily negative. And you wouldn't know it until very late into the game when your competitors actually already outpaced you and won. So it's important to know if automation is the goal for this particular exercise, so there is a bigger problem for customer and the company we're trying to solve. Can automation be excessive or not? It's another interesting problem. So if we can automate and if it's good for both customer and the company, can it be too much, right? Or it's just going to keep happening all the time? So it's another topic we're going to be touching on, which actually results in a mental conclusion that, well, sometimes it's actually too much. Humans are actually underrated. In many cases, robots should not be competing with humans. They should be collaborating with humans. And in this case, it becomes a symbiotic relationship rather than just, like, again, competition, which is not good for us, and we're concerned about it. Perspective does matter on automation. We touched on this topic in the panel. And it's, again, like, why do we automate? Who do we serve? What kind of problems we're solving? So the way I think about it is I always distinguish three kinds of stakeholders. Customer comes probably first, then employee probably comes second, and the shareholder probably comes third. We don't have to prioritize, but usually, if you don't have customers, you probably won't have employees or investors. And if you don't have employees to service your customers, investors will probably also not be happy. So the hierarchy could be different. Some companies now claim that employees actually even come first and then customers. But those are three things you need to be always thinking about. And depending on the framework you have for your automation, the result of this whole automation exercise may be very different. And then final one is cut costs versus value creation. We discussed a lot today about this. So automation and outsourcing are frequently seen as ways to, again, cut costs and improve business bottom line by keeping revenue the same but replacing unnecessary costs. It's a good framework, but there are better frameworks. In some cases, you can think of, OK, so what about if I'm doing certain things today inefficiently, but I'm creating some kind of value with it, right? So maybe I can restructure those activities in a way, not necessarily replacing them with machines or making those humans less expensive. Maybe there is something core to my customer which technology can be used to help me do more of and better that actually can maybe help me both drive costs down or create more value. So it's a more creative approach where value comes first. It's not about just costs. And here's an example I illustrated. Actually, automotive is a pretty interesting industry where first big breakthrough was arguably the assembly line, where machine kind of helps the human to be more efficient, right? Machine has not directly competed with human. My take on this. In this moment, it was meant to be like to make my job more enjoyable and to make me as a human more productive. So if we look at the Ford plant versus today's Tesla plant, there is not, I don't see any humans on this picture, and it's basically looking quite futuristic, right? Like lots of red, and all of those red are machines, and all the white is non-machines. And the only question you can ask yourself, well, is it basically, if it's happening on such a scale in such a big industry, is it only going to be happening more and more, or sometimes it's just too much? And it was fun to find the answer to this question from basically the founder and CEO of this company, just a couple, like 2 or 3 days ago. Yeah, he does believe, and again, this is one of the most futuristically minded people and probably automation-focused people on the planet. So if even Elon believes that automation at this particular company has gone too far, and the humans should be given more kind of responsibility and praise, that makes me hopeful that, again, lots of other people in the world think about it this way, so we're not going to be automating everything all the time.
The cost of this learning was billions of dollars.
Are you an investor?
Thank you.
So we can actually, we can stop here. So the company is, so I guess this comes as an acknowledgement that the company is struggling to hit the promised volumes of production, right? Which is 5, and now it's 6,000 vehicles. But it's already at 2,000, which is public, right? So there is 3x more to do. So again, I'm taking an optimistic view on this. Eventually, I do believe that machines should probably be created by robots because it's been hundreds of years. Like you can argue how much creativity can human built into the assembly itself, right? So now, just in the moment, if the market wants to see 5,000 cars, can you deliver 5,000 cars per week with this existing machinery? And the answer is, well, no, we didn't think about it the right way. We actually do need humans to come at this phase of the company to help hit this 5,000. But in 2019, 2021, I still believe we kind of get back into this world of the red pictures. So probably it's going to be good for the company, the customers, and the employees. We can discuss. But currently, company is kind of rolling back its automation a little bit in favor of humans, which is a good illustration again. So the lesson learned from this, and also from other experience in my life, is that yes, humans are underrated. You should think of technology not as and robots not as just direct competitors to the humans and potentially like cost-cutting engines for your company, but you should think of humans as the key asset you have that you can multiply for your company in terms of how much value they can deliver by giving them better machinery, right? That's a big lesson, and I hope to again take this lesson into many other products. So and then I like this quote from Steve Jobs, so I'm going to use it here about collaboration versus with robots instead of competition. It's just philosophically what kind of mindset we take, it matters. And he talks about the bicycle, for instance. And there is an example of the bicycle we're going to discuss later here. So humans with a bicycle is interesting because it suddenly becomes the most efficient species in terms of efficiency of like moving per calorie used, right? You know this fact, and there is this famous Steve Jobs videos with this you can watch. Basically, humans are not efficient with the way we spend energy, right? When we walk, we run, we're pretty inefficient. We burn, and we waste lots of energy. And the most efficient in the nature is condor. Like when it flies, it burns very little energy. So the funny thing is when you put the human on the bicycle, the human suddenly becomes way better than condor, and way better than even, I guess, some vehicles, and way better than some technology kind of vehicles that humanity has produced. This is a big lesson to me. If you take a simple tool like bicycle, and you take a pretty mediocre in terms of performance, right? In terms of like how far I can go with a unit of energy, pretty mediocre human is a representative of animal world, and you give him a bicycle, suddenly becomes the best, right? So we should think in our companies of technology. We should get pretty, maybe even average workers in some cases, give them good tools, and they suddenly become our key assets. Instead of trying to replace them with the bicycles. We should seat them on a bicycle. And that's the quote. I really love it. I thought it's worthwhile to put it on the slide. So the condor is obviously number one, but the man on the bicycle is way better than the condor.
Quick question. Is that
One more?
Is there a relationship between the bicycle and the human and the capability compatibility? Because if the bicycle is superior or faster than what it is today, would there be an incompatibility issue that is going to reduce the peak performance as you have described?
It's a good question. And what do we measure? How do we measure performance?
Because you talked about that human by itself, energy consumption and the performance is not optimal.
Yes.
Bicycle is a mediocre equipment
Yes.
or a tool.
Yes.
When you combine the two, you get the peak performance or one better performance.
Yes.
If the bicycle was superior, a little bit better than what it is today.
Yes.
Would there be any incompatibility, and would you have to adjust for that? That's the question. And cars.
I don't know. What do we think in the audience? So I think bicycles can only get better. Humans can only get better, right? If you look at humans, we run faster, right? Like we still break the records in runs and swims and biking. So humans are getting better by getting better muscles, training better. Bicycles are getting better. So everything can only be improved. So I think that's the take we should take. Pretty optimistic one. Humans can be improved. Technologies can be improved. We're not talking about replacing one thing with another. We're just talking about improving them all for the better outcome for this particular company, for this customer, for society overall. It's like, I think philosophically it's just a much better approach to things instead of am I going to be replaced versus what is my potential without the machine and with a machine, right?
But there's a real compatibility argument that I hear coming out of this because, and we know this is true because if you put the condor on the bicycle, it doesn't do very well.
Yeah.
So just like you put some technology with a human and it doesn't do well. So compatibility is really key.
That's fair.
Or you automate the wrong process versus the right process. That's the point, yeah.
That's fair. Thank you. Great question.
Condor probably wouldn't do well with the computer either.
All right, so some examples. I honestly just went and looked at collaboration of humans and robots. There is lots of ways we collaborate with robots today. You can even think for yourself. Those are that came on Google first. So we are collaborating with robots a lot today, and it all starts with tools as simple as bicycle and as complex as computer and iPhone and a lot more tools. So this collaboration is improving our lives quite substantially. So lesson is perspective does matter a lot. Depending on how you think of automation, what problem you're solving, your whole outcome is going to be profoundly different. If you take a head of those are the humans which I want to replace because they're unnecessary cost to my enterprise, you're going to end up with one outcome. Maybe it's a good outcome, maybe it's a bad outcome, but it's going to be different from the outcome when you think, so I have those humans, they do create cost to the company, but there is some value they create. Can we think of the ways to multiply this value by giving them better tools? And maybe in the process, maybe it can also drive costs down. So I'm now trying to always take this positive head, always think about the value, how we can create multiplier to existing humans. And only the latest possible in this thoughts will be, OK, so should technology be even used to replace the human? And this is a good example. I just wanted to think about it. When we're concerned about jobs, I'm actually concerned that machine can replace my job pretty easily. And how can we take this to extreme and think of the toughest jobs that could never be, for instance, replaced, right? And one of those jobs is data scientist. Like it's probably top of the hierarchy. People are making pretty complex judgments. Could machine replace this profession, or could machine change this profession in a meaningful way? And the interesting thing is, if you look at what data scientists do day to day, most of it is routine, right? It's not data science. It's like cleaning up the data, getting data ready for analysis, and like 5% of your job is like whatever goes into between 5 and 10% of your job is actually something that you really enjoy, right? My job as product manager, probably something like that, like probably 90% routine, maybe 5% something you really enjoy, and 5% you don't mind, right? But most of our jobs are actually 90% routine jobs. And that takes us to an idea that, again, there is a lot of potential, not for machines replacing our jobs, but for machines to take on the burden of the least exciting pieces of our jobs. Like, why doesn't the machine give me better data to start with so that I don't spend 60% of my time cleaning and organizing it, right? And then I can spend all of my time to build better models and come with better outcomes. So I think, again, this is an important way to think about it. If the most exciting and sexiest jobs of the 21st century are so boring and mechanical today, like vast majority of we normal people jobs, like the jobs that we hold are even less exciting and have a lot more routine component to it. So let machines come and help us automate it out and focus on the productive, cool stuff, right? So final lesson is automation must create value rather than simply be seen as a cost-cutting tool. And I don't think I have a visual slide, so I just summarized the final thoughts here, and we can open it for discussion. So those learnings are all pretty basic, but I think the more basic you take them, the more deeply it makes you think about what's in it for real. And again, it really matters to me to know that I'm not just automating for the sake of automation. Whoever comes to me asking, when are we automating this next? My previous response was always trying to think of when we can possibly automate it. But now I can always ask, so OK, tell me the problem we're going to solve with automation. Like maybe do we even need automation? So it's important. Automation can actually be excessive, so you should be very thoughtful about when to scale it back. And removing automation is sometimes a very business positive value effort, which I hope you will realize in the value of the shares at some point when the company puts more humans into the assembly line. And yes, value creation mindset is really important. It will produce much better outcomes for society. It will produce much better automation strategy and automation projects and automation outcomes. That's my final takeaway from automation experience. Thank you. Questions?
What's the most routine part of your job?
That's a good question. I would say you need to project manage things a lot. I'm a product manager, so you basically, the way I see this role is you're responsible for the output and the quality of the output. But the more recent view on the product manager job is you cannot really control any inputs because your team just does their jobs. So the toughest piece, maybe it's not all mechanical, but the toughest piece is to actually be delivering great results without being able to do things yourself. So you need to always monitor and see what's happening, and always think about like, how do I intercept? What do I do? Because you cannot help your team do your job. You're not an engineer. You're not a designer. You're not a data scientist. So the routine part is to always think about it. It's actually a routine thought process, and to try to constantly help your team do a better job.
I I think the component of getting the information from various different people and interpreting it right for you is a component which one can look at in project management automation.
I think it's like to be successful in this type of jobs, you do need to do lots of project management yourself, and I would argue it's not the most creative part of my job, right? There is more creative.
I was looking at within the routine, what is more routine for you?
Oh, there is even more routine. I'm actually maybe not. I'm actually maybe lucky because, yeah, I don't need to clean the data in my day job too much, right? But there are some still like I feel like my job is still more routine than it's creative. Mm-hmm. It's still more about execution and actually getting things done, which to me is a routine thing. Yes, James.
A good saying for that last one at Catalytic we have is that instead of focusing on taking shares away from the table, we focus on making a bigger table. Right? Like
Love it. Yep.
creating a bigger company, growing sales, creating efficiencies, and not necessarily moving people.
There is a very limited amount of space to go down to zero when you cut costs. There is infinite potential when you go up, right? It's just like, should you invest in startup or not? It can only go down minus 100%. It could go up millions of percent, right? Same mindset.
So that's the business case for using automation to create value, but still in the operations side of the business, there's always a need to cut costs. And so I think you need to say that automation is really for both cost cutting and creating value. Because if you don't apply the automation to, your routine operations and make them better, someone else will beat you at that as well. Do you want to, I welcome the opposing argument to that.
Mm-hmm.
If I may pitch in, there's a point at which when you start eliminating certain steps, you all of a sudden create a much higher value. So operational efficiency can take you down up to a particular level, but then all of a sudden it pulls you up very quickly in the curve because you're almost eliminated something, which was, and if you look at the history of automation, that's what happened. You had inflections. Grammatically speaking, there, but going forward, same thing might apply.
And cutting cost is important for as long as it does not drive customer value down, right? If it helps your shareholders, it obviously does not help your employees because they get jobless in the short term, but let's hope they will do better in the long term because they will educate themselves into better jobs. So employee impact is unclear. Company impact is, let's hope it's positive shareholder impact. Customer impact is honestly also unclear. That's my whole concern around cost-cutting pieces. I've never seen long-term studies on cost cutting, right? So it's always consultant comes and not, I don't mean it in a bad way for consultants, but what's the easiest way to deliver the value? It's like, let's just cut this cost, right? It looks obsessed, like it looks too high, just cut it. It doesn't seem to be impacting customer experience or customer need. What actually can happen in real life, the problem can be moving somewhere within your organization somewhere else where you don't even notice it for a long while. Eventually it blows up in that part of organization which drives down your so we don't know the impact of those cost-cutting initiatives. That's my whole concern with, I've not seen the evidence. I assume in some cases cost-cutting is a good activity when the company.
Cutting is not the right lens to look through. It's a productivity issue.
Right.
So if you are creating a widget and it costs X dollars, right? Just make the example, and it can be done at X minus Y. So we talk about it from a cost-cutting perspective, but I'm in healthcare. I think I said that earlier. We look at certain metrics in different departments, and we call it as a unit cost, right? What is the unit cost to provide a service or make something? And are we at the best optimum cost? So that's increasing productivity, that's using automation, AI, process optimization, a number of different things that we can do, correct? And once you feel that you have achieved what could be a best of class in terms of your particular cost compared to others, if you're benchmarking, then you think about innovation. Because the environment, at least where we live, or I live, cost is very important. So just a different way of looking at it.
Yes, and I don't think it's universally a requirement, depending on business to business model. sole driver could be value without any cost perspective. Financial investments, software firms, where they're just driving value through the roof and not necessarily having to weigh that against a cost.
Where cost is not that important. I agree. I agree.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Vasily.
Thank you, Anupam. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
So, I think we had a well-rounded set of sessions today. I hope you all learned a few things around